By 9:07 a.m., someone was trying to break my door off its hinges. The sound was so violent it rattled the mugs in my kitchen cabinet. My daughter, Leela, froze with a spoon halfway to her mouth, cereal dripping onto her pajama sleeve. Her eyes found mine wide, unsure, bracing. She didn't have to ask who it was. I already knew. But stories like this don't start with someone shouting your name like they own the air you breathe. They start with something small, something stupid. One message, one excuse, one choice that makes a hairline crack. The kind you don't notice until everything finally splits apart. Mine began the moment my mother texted me, "We won't make it to Leela's birthday. Things are complicated right now," and it ended with a truth my family had been burying for years, one they never thought I'd dig up. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from. It helps to know I'm not the only one untangling the knots of people who should have loved better. My name is Arden, and for most of my life, I got by lowering the bar so severely that even disappointment had to stoop to get under it. I was the dependable one, the quiet one, the one who patched every hole the moment it appeared, whether or not anyone bothered to say thank you. It's a strange education, learning to swallow every hurt before breakfast. But some families teach you things you never asked to learn. I live in a tiny apartment on the south side of Clearwater Cove, a place where the air smells like salt water and sun-bleached wood. The floors creak in the winter. The windows fog in the early mornings. But the light pours in beautifully, and it's ours. Just enough room for me and Leela, who fills every corner with paper stars, glitter glue, and that soft humming she does when she's thinking. The morning the message arrived, she was coloring a picture of a Pegasus wearing blue rain boots. She looked up at me with those brown hazel eyes I've loved since the moment they opened, eyes she inherited from me, though hers haven't dimmed the way mine sometimes do. "Do you think Nana and Papa are coming this year?" she asked, tapping her crayon against the table. "I hope so," I said. And I did. Even though deep down, I already knew the answer. I hadn't even finished cutting strawberries for her lunch when my phone buzzed. The message was short, thoughtless, brutal in its casualness. "We won't make it to Leela's birthday. Things are complicated. And no reason. No apology. No effort." I stared at the words for several seconds, willing them to morph into something kinder, something human. But they refused to change. I typed back, "Okay, no problem." But it was a problem. For her, for me, for the part of me that still believed stupidly that one day my parents would show up because they wanted to, not because they needed something. The rest of the day passed like a movie I wasn't really watching. I helped Leela tape sparkles to her drawing. I responded to work messages. I laughed at something she said, even though I barely heard it. Every now and then, the text flashed across my mind like a flicker of lightning. Maybe they're struggling, I told myself. Maybe they're overwhelmed. But then the memories paraded in, marching one after another, loud and undeniable. The years I covered their phone bill after my father got fired from his third job in 6 months. The months I paid their insurance premiums so they wouldn't lose their car. The debts, the emergencies, the just this once Arden that always turned into 10 more times. My parents were experts at preaching loyalty, especially when they were the ones cashing in on it. When Leela's birthday arrived that weekend, she wore a little teal dress with yellow buttons she insisted didn't match, but somehow did. She asked if we could make strawberry cupcakes instead of buying a store cake. I said yes because I always say yes to her. Rain hammered the windows all afternoon, so we laid out a picnic blanket in the living room and pretended it was a meadow. 2 of her classmates came by, their parents, leaving behind cheerful hellos and paper gift bags with tissue paper sticking out like fireworks. Leela danced, laughed, and tried so hard to enjoy the day. But after her friends left, after the cupcakes were half eaten and the music quieted down, she held a candle between her fingers and whispered, "Maybe they'll come next year." She didn't cry. She didn't pout. She just cleaned the glitter off the table, humming that soft tune that always means she's trying to stay brave. Something inside me shifted, then not like a break, but like a lock finally turning. Christmas crept in quicker than I expected. Leela woke up early that morning in her red snowflake pajamas, clutching a drawing she'd made of my parents holding hands with her between them. She drew a heart above their heads, a heart she still believed they shared. She sat by the window waiting, chin on knees, humming, "I made cocoa." I checked my phone. I pretended I wasn't checking. Noon passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing, not even a stray emoji. "Maybe they're busy," I said. She nodded without looking at me. but her shoulders curled inward. When she drifted off to watch a movie, I opened my laptop. I don't know why. Habit, maybe, or hope, or the masochistic part of me that still wanted them to be different. The moment the screen lit, everything inside me froze. A towering Christmas tree wrapped in silver lights, gift mountains spilling across the carpet, a balloon garland twisting over their doorway, my sister Rowan's kids tearing through their presents like a sponsored commercial shoot, my mother in the background holding a giant snowflake-covered box, grinning so wide she looked, carved out of sunlight, and above it, the caption, "Couldn't be happier spending Christmas with our favorite little ones, favorite." The words sliced through me cleanly, quietly. I didn't hear Leela walk up. Not until her small hand slid onto my arm. She saw the screen, the balloons, the kids with matching pajamas, the celebration she'd been dreaming of. "They forgot me," she whispered. Again. Her voice didn't crack. That almost made it worse. That night, after she fell asleep beside me on the couch, I sat alone in the hallway with the lights off. The darkness wasn't comforting. It pressed against my ribs, reminding me of every bill, every favor, every sacrifice. For what? So they could forget her twice in one season? Something didn't break in me. It aligned. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that felt unnervingly calm. I tucked a blanket around Leela, brushed her hair off her forehead, and kissed her cheek. Then I opened my laptop not to scroll, not to soothe, not to make excuses. To end it. One by one, I canceled everything they relied on me for. Phone plans, insurance, renewals, the little monthly transfers I'd been making out of habit and guilt. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because loving them had become a wound. And I was finally choosing to stop bleeding. By sunrise, I was done. Around a.m., my phone rang. Not my parents, of course. My sister Rowan, Arden. Dad's losing his mind. Mom is crying. Everything's shut off. What happened? Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired, familiar, a voice that had survived our parents too. "I'm finished," I said. "That's all." A long pause. Then a soft exhale. Good. The rest of the day felt almost peaceful. I cleaned. I folded laundry. I helped Leela paint cardboard snowflakes for the windows. Ordinary things, made lighter by the absence of invisible chains. But storms don't disappear when you ignore them. They gather. They wait. And the next morning, they arrived. At 9:07 a.m. someone began pounding on the door like they meant to cave it in. Leela jumped. I pulled her behind me. "Arden." A voice roared from the hall. "Open this door right now." My father. I cracked the door open an inch. His face filled the gap red, furious, the kind of rage that comes not from hurt but from losing control of something he wasn't entitled to. "What the hell did you do?" he snapped. "The phones are dead. The insurance is gone. Even the roadside membership. Are you trying to ruin us?" Behind him stood my mother Mara, clutching her purse like it was armor. Beside her, my Aunt Cora and cousin Blake, arms crossed, ready to judge. "Everything I paid for," I said. "I stopped paying for." My father shoved the door. I blocked it with my foot. He glared over my shoulder at Leela, hiding behind me. "You're dragging her into this," he barked. "You're poisoning her against us." "Poisoning?" I asked softly. "Is that what you call skipping her birthday? Or posting an entire Christmas celebration for Rowan's kids while pretending she doesn't exist?" Cora scoffed. "Oh, stop being dramatic," Blake chimed in. "Everyone's saying you're blowing this out of proportion like always." Leela stepped forward, small and steady. "They forgot me," she said. Silence cracked over them. My father looked away first. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I calmly listed every bill I'd paid to keep them afloat. Every month I stepped in. Every time they used me as a safety net instead of being a family. My father flinched at each one, but refused to back down. And then I handed him the envelope, the loan application with my name on it, my signature forged, my credit used, my parents' address and phone number. Nearly $9,000 taken out. My mother gasped. Blake whispered, "Holy, it was a misunderstanding." My father said quickly, "You didn't need the money as badly as we did." There it was, the truth, ugly, naked, final. "You stole from me," I said, "and you justified it." He lunged for the papers. I pulled them back. "If you file anything," he started. "I already did." Silence, heavy, sinking. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I will do anything to protect my daughter," I said. "Even from you." Leela tugged my sleeve. "Mom, can we close the door now?" "Yes," I said. I shut it. He didn't stop me this time. Over the next weeks, everything shifted. Distant relatives sent melodramatic messages about forgiveness and loyalty. I ignored them. My aunt posted vague quotes about ungrateful daughters. She deleted them when comments turned against her. Rowan brought groceries by one evening. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You did what I never could." Inside our home, life softened. Leela's paintings grew brighter. Her laughter returned. Her school selected one of her art pieces for the winter showcase, a swirl of indigo and gold that made her beam in that shy, radiant way she has. I got a promotion. More stability. More breathing room. Mora stopped by the time winter circled back. Leela and I were decorating our small tree again. She hung a little golden bird ornament she bought with her allowance and stepped back, smiling. "Do you like it, Mama?" "I love it," I said. "More than you know." Because looking at her, glowing in the warm light of our living room, I finally understood. We didn't lose family. We found peace. We found each other. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from those who mistake your love for a resource they are entitled to. If you've ever had to choose peace over chaos, if you've ever had to build your own version of family, tell me in the comments. You're not alone. And if this story resonated with you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.